What if everything you've been taught about the birth of Christ was only half the story? What if the greatest miracle of Christianity wasn't meant to be celebrated once a year, but experienced every single day within your own consciousness? This might sound radical, even controversial to some, but stay with me here, because what you're about to discover has the power to completely transform how you understand spirituality, divine consciousness, and your own true nature. For centuries, millions of people around the world have commemorated Christmas as a historical event, something that happened 2,000 years ago in a stable in Bethlehem. We light candles, exchange gifts, sing carols, and reflect on the story of Mary, Joseph, and the infant Jesus. But what if this beautiful narrative is actually a mirror, reflecting a profound spiritual truth that's meant to unfold within you right now, in this very moment? Smith Wigglesworth, one of the most powerful spiritual teachers of the 20th century, revealed something that most religious institutions have overlooked or perhaps hidden. The birth of Christ is not just about history, it's about a mystical awakening that must happen within your own awareness. Has this ever occurred to you? That perhaps the stories you've heard since childhood contain layers of meaning far deeper than the literal interpretation? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Think about it for a moment. When we read about Mary's receptive consciousness, the humility of the stable, the guiding star of illumination, these aren't just poetic details of an ancient story. According to Wigglesworth's mystical understanding, these are symbols pointing directly to your own spiritual journey, your own inner transformation. Every element of the Christmas narrative is speaking to something that can and must happen within your consciousness today. This isn't about religion in the traditional sense. This is about recognizing a truth so powerful that when it awakens within you, every limitation you've accepted as real begins to dissolve. We're talking about your health, your relationships, your finances, your sense of peace and purpose. All of these areas of your life begin to shift when Christ consciousness is born within you. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it's not about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you already are beneath all the layers of human conditioning and false beliefs. Wigglesworth understood something profound, that divine consciousness isn't something distant or external. It's not something you need to earn or achieve through years of religious practice. It's your true nature, waiting to be recognized. And the moment this recognition happens, the moment Christ is born within your awareness, everything changes. Not because you've created something new, but because you've finally awakened to what was always true. So what does this mystical birth really mean, and how can it transform your life in practical, tangible ways? Stay with me, because we're about to explore the most revolutionary spiritual teaching you may ever encounter. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because here's where the real transformation begins, where everything you thought you knew about spirituality gets turned upside down in the most liberating way possible. Smith Wigglesworth taught something that might challenge everything traditional religion has told you. Christ is not a person you worship from a distance. Christ is the infinite consciousness of God expressing itself as you, as me, as every individual being. Take a moment to let that sink in. This isn't blasphemy. This is the hidden truth that mystics throughout history have tried to convey, often at great personal risk. When you truly grasp this revelation, something extraordinary happens in your mindset. You stop the exhausting search for salvation outside yourself. You stop waiting for someone or something external to rescue you, heal you, or make you whole. Instead, you begin to recognize that the very consciousness experiencing these words right now, the awareness that's listening to my voice in this moment, is nothing less than the presence of God in expression. This is the birth we're talking about, not a future event, not something you need to qualify for, but a present recognition of what has always been true. The shift happens when you stop identifying with the limited human self, the self that worries, that feels inadequate, that believes it's separate from the divine. You begin to recognize your true identity as spiritual consciousness itself. This isn't about becoming something new or achieving a higher state through endless spiritual practices. Wigglesworth was crystal clear about this distinction. He called it recognition, not treatment. You're not trying to become spiritual through affirmations, visualizations, or positive thinking techniques. Those things have their place, but they're not the core of this teaching. What you're doing is recognizing what's already true, what has always been true, even when you couldn't see it. If this teaching resonates with you and you want to continue exploring these transformative truths, subscribe to the channel. I'm here regularly sharing wisdom that can support your spiritual journey and help you recognize the Christ consciousness within. This recognition creates a profound impact on how you face every single challenge in your journey. Think about it. When illness appears in your body, the typical response is to fight the disease, to declare war on it, to see it as an enemy that must be defeated. But Wigglesworth revealed a completely different approach. You recognize the Christ consciousness within you that knows no sickness, that exists in a realm where disease has no reality. When financial lack appears, you don't struggle and stress and try to manipulate circumstances. You recognize the infinite abundance that's already present in consciousness, waiting to express itself in form. This is where most people get stuck, because we've been conditioned to believe that we need to do something, achieve something, or become worthy of divine blessings. But the truth behind all spiritual practice is much simpler and much more revolutionary. You're not building something new. You're unveiling something that's been covered up by years of false beliefs and human conditioning. Every limitation you've accepted as real, every boundary you've believed defines you, every problem you think is permanent, all of these begin to dissolve when you recognize your true nature as spiritual consciousness. The beauty of this teaching is that it changes everything while requiring nothing except a shift in perception. You don't need special training. You don't need to be religious. You don't need years of meditation practice. What you need is the willingness to see yourself differently, to recognize the divine presence that's been expressing as your life all along. Write in the comments, "I recognize the truth within me," if this resonates with something deep inside you. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates how this recognition works in real life, because sometimes the most powerful revelations come from seeing how ordinary people experience extraordinary transformations. There was a businessman named Robert who found himself on the edge of financial collapse. His company was facing bankruptcy, creditors were calling daily, and the stress was consuming him from the inside out. Like so many of us would do, Robert turned to every spiritual technique he could find. He spent months doing affirmations, visualizing abundance, creating vision boards, repeating mantras, all the things we've been told will manifest prosperity into our lives. But here's the fascinating part. Nothing changed. The money didn't come. The clients didn't return. The debt kept mounting. Robert was doing everything right according to popular spiritual teaching, yet his circumstances remained stubbornly fixed in struggle. Then something happened during one of his meditation sessions that changed everything. He stopped. He simply stopped trying to change his circumstances, stopped trying to attract money, stopped trying to become prosperous. In that moment of complete surrender, a quiet recognition emerged from somewhere deep within. I am consciousness. I am the presence of God individualized. This wasn't a dramatic spiritual experience with lights and visions. It was a subtle, profound shift in his fundamental identity. And that shift, that simple recognition of his true nature, transformed his entire reality. Within 3 weeks, opportunities began appearing seemingly out of nowhere. A former client he'd written off as lost contacted him with a major contract. A debt he thought would never be repaid suddenly came back to him. But here's what's truly remarkable. More important than the money that flowed to him was the complete transformation of his relationship with money itself. The fear dissolved, the anxiety disappeared. He no longer felt like a victim of circumstances because he recognized himself as consciousness, and consciousness is never limited by external conditions. This brings us to a crucial understanding about how this birth of Christ consciousness actually happens. Wigglesworth was emphatic about this. The birth must happen in silence. Not in the noise of mental effort, not through the repetition of positive statements, not by thinking your way to enlightenment. You cannot think or affirm your way into divine recognition. The mind, as powerful as it is for navigating the physical world, cannot create spiritual awakening. It can only get out of the way so that recognition can occur naturally. Behind the scenes of all spiritual transformation is this profound truth. The Christ within you doesn't need to be created, manufactured, or attracted from somewhere outside yourself. It needs to be discovered, unveiled, recognized through the cessation of mental striving. This is where so many sincere seekers get trapped in endless cycles of spiritual practice without breakthrough. They're adding more effort, more techniques, more practices, when what's actually needed is subtraction, the removal of the mental noise that obscures what's already present. Traditional prayer, as Wigglesworth observed, often reinforces the very problem it seeks to solve. When you pray to God as if God is somewhere else, listening from a distance, deciding whether to grant your request, you're actually strengthening the belief in separation. You're treating the divine as external, as other than yourself. But Christ consciousness recognizes something radically different, that you and the Father are one, not in the future after you become holy enough, not as a reward for good behavior, but right now as the fundamental truth of your existence. The impact of this understanding on your daily decisions, your emotional state, your sense of security, cannot be overstated. When you recognize yourself as consciousness rather than as a limited human personality struggling through life, everything shifts. The journey from struggle to peace isn't about climbing a spiritual ladder. It's about stopping, becoming still, and recognizing what you've always been. Comment below with, "I am consciousness," if you're beginning to see this truth for yourself, because something powerful happens when you declare this recognition out loud. What makes this teaching so powerful is that it's not just theoretical philosophy, it's immediately practical for every single situation you face. Today, Wigglesworth spent his entire life demonstrating this truth, and the secret he taught can be applied right now in whatever challenge you're currently experiencing. Before you face any situation, whether it's a difficult conversation, a health concern, a financial decision, or a relationship conflict, there's a simple practice that changes everything. You pause, not to think about solutions, not to plan strategies or figure out the best approach, but to recognize something far more profound. In that pause, you acknowledge, the Christ consciousness within me knows the way. I don't need to figure this out. I need to be still and let divine wisdom reveal itself through my awareness. This might sound too simple to be effective, but that's exactly the hidden truth that most people miss. We've been trained to believe that we need to strategize, analyze, and mentally wrestle with every problem until we force a solution. But that approach keeps us trapped in limited human thinking, when divine wisdom is available the moment we stop the mental striving and allow it to emerge. The impact of this simple shift in your daily decisions cannot be overstated. You move from exhausting effort to effortless flow. You stop carrying the burden of having to figure everything out, and instead become a channel through which divine intelligence operates. This isn't about being passive or avoiding responsibility. It's about recognizing that there's a deeper wisdom available to you than your limited human mind can access through thinking alone. Let me share another transformation that demonstrates just how profound this recognition can be. Barbara had been suffering from chronic pain for 12 years. Imagine living every single day with pain that never stops, that colors every experience, that makes even simple tasks feel overwhelming. She tried everything the medical establishment had to offer: medications, physical therapy, surgeries, pain management programs. She explored alternative therapies, acupuncture, energy healing, dietary changes. Some things provided temporary relief, but the pain always returned, sometimes even worse than before. Then Barbara attended a class where Wigglesworth's teachings were being shared, and she heard something that initially seemed disconnected from her physical suffering. She learned that Christ consciousness knows no pain, because it's not body consciousness. At first, this sounded like spiritual bypassing, like she was being told to just ignore her very real physical experience. But as the teacher explained further, Barbara began to understand something that would change her entire journey with pain. The revelation wasn't about denying her body's condition. It was about recognizing her true identity. Barbara had spent 12 years identifying as a person in chronic pain. That identity, that story about who she was, had become so deeply embedded in her mindset that she couldn't imagine herself any other way. But what if she wasn't fundamentally a body experiencing pain? What if she was consciousness itself, observing the body and its sensations but not limited by them? When Barbara stopped identifying with her painful body and began recognizing herself as the consciousness observing the body, something shifted at a level far deeper than technique or treatment. Her identity transformed. She wasn't fighting pain anymore, wasn't trying to make it go away through willpower or positive thinking. She was simply resting in the recognition of what she truly was, awareness itself, untouched by the physical sensations moving through the body she observed. The results weren't instantaneous, but they were profound. Over the following weeks, Barbara noticed the pain gradually diminishing, not because she was doing anything to it, but because her fundamental relationship with it had changed. 6 months later, she was completely pain-free, not through healing the body in the conventional sense, but through recognizing that she was never the body to begin with. Write "I am awareness" in the comments if you're beginning to see how identity shapes everything we experience, including what we think are purely physical conditions. If something shifted inside you while watching this, if you felt that inner recognition of truth, show me by hitting the like button. It helps others who are searching for this message find their way here too. This principle of identity transformation extends into every area of life, especially our relationships where we often feel most vulnerable and powerless. Consider William's story. His marriage was falling apart. Communication had completely broken down, and divorce seemed like the only inevitable outcome. Like most of us would do in that situation, William prayed desperately for God to intervene, to fix his wife, to change the circumstances that were tearing his family apart. He pleaded, he bargained, he tried to be a better husband through sheer willpower, but nothing shifted. The distance between him and his wife only grew wider. Then William discovered Wigglesworth's teaching, and everything about his approach changed. He stopped praying for his wife to be different. He stopped waiting for external circumstances to shift before he could feel whole again. Instead, he began the profound work of recognizing Christ consciousness in himself. This wasn't about improving his behavior or developing better communication skills, though those things naturally followed. This was about a fundamental shift in identity. William stopped seeing himself as a wounded husband, as a victim of his wife's choices, as someone incomplete without his marriage being fixed. He began recognizing his true identity as divine love in expression. The impact was remarkable. Within 3 months, their marriage had completely transformed. His wife began responding to him differently, not because he manipulated her or used some technique, but because he was expressing from an entirely different level of consciousness. But here's the real miracle, the hidden truth behind all relationship transformation. William no longer needed his wife to be different for him to experience peace and wholeness. His sense of completion came from recognizing what he truly was, not from getting someone else to change. This is the journey every relationship calls us to take, from seeking wholeness through others to recognizing the wholeness we already are. This same principle applies to the area where most people feel the most immediate pressure: finances. When you're experiencing lack, when the bills are piling up and the bank account is empty, it feels like you have a money problem. But Wigglesworth revealed something that challenges everything we've been taught about prosperity. When you experience financial lack, you're not experiencing a problem with money. You're experiencing a problem with consciousness. Money is simply the outer form, the visible manifestation of an inner awareness of abundance or scarcity. Daniel's story illustrates this perfectly. He'd been unemployed for 8 months. His savings were completely depleted, bills were overdue, and the fear of losing everything consumed his thoughts day and night. He sent out countless resumes, went to every interview he could get, and prayed constantly for God to send him a job. The desperation in his prayers was palpable, but desperation itself reinforces the consciousness of lack. Then Daniel learned about recognition instead of petition, and his entire approach transformed. Instead of begging God for employment, instead of anxiously trying to force opportunities to appear, Daniel began practicing something radically different. He sat quietly and recognized, "I am consciousness. Consciousness is infinite and complete. My supply comes from within, not from external sources. This recognition didn't deny his practical need for income, but it shifted where he was looking for his source. He stopped seeing employers, the economy, or circumstances as his supply. He began recognizing consciousness itself as the infinite source from which all provision flows. The transformation happened faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, Daniel received a call about a position he'd applied for 4 months earlier, a position he'd completely forgotten about and written off. The job offered significantly more than his previous employment, but more importantly, his entire relationship with money and security had fundamentally shifted. He'd discovered that his real supply wasn't dependent on external conditions, but flowed from his recognition of consciousness as infinite abundance. Put "my source is within" in the comments if this revelation is shifting how you see your own financial journey and the decisions you make from scarcity versus abundance. What we're discovering here is that the birth of Christ within isn't some dramatic one-time event that happens and then you're finished with spiritual work forever. It's a daily practice of recognition, a continuous returning to truth that gradually becomes your natural way of being. Think of it like this. Every morning before you engage with the demands of the day, before you check your phone or start thinking about problems, there's an opportunity to anchor yourself in reality. Not the reality of circumstances, but the reality of what you truly are. This morning practice is beautifully simple. You return to this fundamental truth. You are not a human being trying to become spiritual. You are spiritual consciousness expressing as individual being. That shift in perspective, that recognition repeated daily, transforms everything about how you move through your day. When challenges inevitably appear, and they will, you don't panic or immediately start strategizing. You recognize that the Christ within you already knows the solution. You're not figuring things out from limited human thinking. You're allowing divine wisdom to reveal itself through your awareness. When fear arises, and it will arise because you're still functioning in a human experience, you don't fight the fear or try to replace it with positive thoughts. You recognize the consciousness that exists before fear, the awareness that remains completely untouched by whatever emotion or thought is moving through your experience. This daily practice of recognition gradually builds a foundation that cannot be shaken by external circumstances, no matter how threatening they appear. But Wigglesworth taught something even more powerful for dealing with difficult people and situations, a practice he called impersonalization. This is where the transformation goes deeper, into territory that tests everything you think you know about cause and effect, about who has power over your life and who doesn't. The hidden truth behind impersonalization is radical. No person, no condition, no circumstance has power over consciousness. None. When you truly grasp this, when it becomes more than an intellectual concept and becomes your lived experience, you become unshakable. Nancy's story demonstrates this principle in a way that most people find almost unbelievable until they see it work in their own lives. Her business partner, someone she'd trusted completely, betrayed her. Not just a small disagreement or difference of opinion, but a calculated theft of her client list, her business strategies, everything she'd built over years. The betrayal was devastating on a human level. Her first instincts were rage, revenge, the desire to destroy this person who had destroyed her. But Nancy had been studying Wigglesworth's teachings, and in the midst of her very real human pain, she remembered the practice of impersonalization. She began to recognize something that seemed counterintuitive in that moment of crisis. Her business partner wasn't the source of her supply. Consciousness was. No human action, no matter how malicious, could truly threaten what consciousness provides. This wasn't about being passive or allowing injustice to go unchallenged. Nancy took appropriate legal action, but internally she refused to give the situation power over her sense of wholeness and security. She practiced sitting in silence, recognizing that her true identity as Christ consciousness remained completely untouched by this betrayal. The business might suffer, her feelings might be hurt, but what she truly was couldn't be stolen, couldn't be damaged, couldn't be diminished by anyone's actions. This recognition didn't suppress her emotions or deny the impact of what happened. It shifted where she placed her power and her identity. Within months, something remarkable occurred. Her business not only recovered but grew beyond its previous success, attracting clients who truly valued her work and integrity. The decisions Nancy made during that crisis came from a completely different mindset than if she'd operated from victimhood and fear. She wasn't reacting from woundedness. She was responding from recognition of her true nature as consciousness, and that made all the difference in the journey ahead. Comment: consciousness is my source. If you're seeing how impersonalization could transform situations where you've felt betrayed or victimized. There's another practice Wigglesworth taught that sounds almost impossible until you understand the deeper mechanics of consciousness at work. He called it nothingizing, and it's perhaps the most challenging concept for our rational minds to accept, because it seems to contradict everything we experience in the physical world. But the hidden truth behind nothingizing is this: problems only have the reality we give them through our recognition of them as real and powerful. When you recognize something as nothing in the realm of spiritual reality, you're not denying its appearance in the physical dimension. You're recognizing that it has no existence. In the realm of consciousness, which is the only realm that's actually real and permanent. Kevin's experience demonstrates this principle in a way that physicians would call miraculous, but that Wigglesworth would say is simply the natural result of recognizing spiritual truth. Kevin was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The doctors were clear: he needed immediate surgery. Without it, his prognosis was grim. The fear that diagnosis created was overwhelming, consuming his thoughts day and night. But Kevin had been studying these teachings, and he made a decision that shaped his entire journey forward. He sat quietly in meditation and began recognizing something that seemed to contradict his medical reality. In Christ consciousness, there is no disease. Disease appears in the realm of material sense, but it has no reality in spiritual truth. This wasn't denial of his diagnosis. Kevin continued working with his doctors, following their recommendations, attending all appointments. But internally he was practicing nothingizing, recognizing that the disease, which seemed so real and threatening in the physical dimension, had no existence in the realm of consciousness, where his true identity resided. Over the following months, something remarkable happened. Kevin's condition began improving in ways that puzzled his medical team. The symptoms diminished, the tests showed progressive improvement, and eventually the doctors informed him that surgery was no longer necessary. They called it spontaneous improvement. Kevin understood it as consciousness revealing its true nature when fear and limitation are nothingized, when they're recognized as having no power in spiritual reality. The impact of this practice extends beyond physical healing into the realm of emotional and mental well-being. Wigglesworth taught a complementary practice that transforms how you experience every thought and feeling that moves through your awareness. It's called witnessing, and it shifts you from being caught in the drama of human experience to observing it from the vantage point of consciousness itself. Instead of being your thoughts and emotions, you recognize yourself as the awareness witnessing them. Melissa's transformation illustrates how powerful this shift in perspective can be. She'd struggled with anxiety for years, the kind of anxiety that colors every experience, that makes even simple decisions feel overwhelming, that keeps you awake at night running through worst-case scenarios. She'd tried medication, therapy, breathing techniques, everything conventional wisdom suggested for managing anxiety. Some things helped temporarily, but the underlying anxiety always returned, sometimes even stronger than before. Then Melissa learned the practice of witnessing. During meditation, instead of fighting her anxious thoughts or trying to replace them with positive ones, she simply observed them. She watched anxious thoughts arise in her awareness, noticed them, moving through her consciousness like clouds across the sky, and watched them pass without grabbing onto them or identifying with them. In that observation, she made a profound discovery. She recognized herself as the consciousness witnessing these thoughts, not as the thoughts themselves. This recognition transformed Melissa's entire relationship with anxiety. The thoughts still appeared sometimes, because thoughts are part of human experience, but they no longer controlled her. She could watch them arise, acknowledge them as just thoughts, and let them dissolve without getting caught in the stories they told. Within weeks, her anxiety had diminished significantly, not because she fought it or overcame it through willpower, but because she'd found her true identity as the witness, as the consciousness that remains peaceful and untouched, regardless of what thoughts or emotions pass through awareness. Write, "I am the witness," in the comments, if this practice is revealing a new way of relating to your own thoughts and emotions. The beauty of these practices is that they're not confined to your meditation cushion or your quiet morning routine. Wigglesworth understood that true transformation happens when spiritual recognition permeates every moment of your day, when it becomes as natural as breathing. This is where the real work begins, bringing conscious awareness into the middle of your busy, demanding, sometimes chaotic daily life. Throughout your day, you have countless opportunities to check in with yourself and ask a simple but profound question. Am I living as a human being or as spiritual consciousness right now? Am I reacting from personality or responding from presence? Timothy's story shows exactly how this practice works in the pressure cooker of modern professional life. He was a corporate executive dealing with enormous stress, impossible deadlines, demanding clients, office politics, constant pressure to perform. He felt overwhelmed every single day, carried stress in his body, couldn't sleep well, and was heading toward burnout. Then he discovered this practice of conscious awareness throughout the day, and it transformed his entire experience without changing a single external circumstance. Timothy began setting a reminder on his phone to pause every hour for just 30 seconds. In those brief moments, he would step back from whatever was happening and recognize, "I am not this stressed executive. I am the consciousness witnessing me. This experience. I am the presence of peace itself." These weren't just affirmations he was repeating. They were moments of genuine recognition, of remembering his true identity beneath the role he was playing. The impact was remarkable. He found himself responding to challenges with unexpected wisdom instead of reactive stress. Solutions appeared where before he'd seen only impossible problems. His relationships at work improved dramatically because he wasn't operating from a place of tension and anxiety. What's fascinating is that Timothy's productivity actually increased, not because he was working harder, but because he was operating from a clearer consciousness. The decisions he made came from wisdom rather than panic. His journey demonstrates that spirituality isn't about escaping the demands of daily life. It's about meeting those demands from a completely different level of awareness. But here's where we touch on something truly profound that Wigglesworth pointed toward throughout all his teaching. With consistent practice, with daily return to recognition, something shifts at such a deep level that the practice itself becomes effortless. Recognition is no longer something you do. It becomes what you are. Carol's transformation illustrates this perfectly. She practiced recognition faithfully for 2 years. Every morning, throughout her day, in moments of challenge and moments of peace, she returned again and again to recognizing her true nature as consciousness. Then one day, something quietly shifted. Carol realized she was no longer practicing recognition as a technique she had to remember to do. She was simply being recognition. Christ consciousness wasn't something she achieved during meditation and then lost when she returned to daily activities. It had become her natural state of awareness, present whether she was thinking about it or not. She still functioned in the human world, still faced challenges, still experienced the full range of human emotions, but underneath everything was this unshakable recognition of her true nature as the presence of God individualized. This is the ultimate goal Wigglesworth pointed toward. Not occasional mystical experiences or temporary states of peace, but permanent transformation of identity. Not from achieving something new, but from recognizing what has always been true. Wholeness becomes your nature, not your goal. Completeness becomes your identity, not your pursuit. Peace becomes what you are, not what you're trying to achieve through circumstances finally aligning the way you want them to. Comment, recognition is my nature, if you're on this journey toward making spiritual awareness your permanent state, rather than just an occasional practice. So here we are, at the culmination of this journey through Wigglesworth's profound teaching about the birth of Christ within consciousness. If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration, you've done more than just watch a video. You've opened yourself to a truth that has the power to transform every aspect of your existence. This isn't information you consume and forget. This is a seed that's been planted in your awareness, and with recognition and practice, it will grow in ways you can't yet imagine. I create these videos because I believe this wisdom needs to be shared, that somewhere out there, someone is searching for exactly this message at exactly the right moment in their journey. If that's you, if this resonated deeply, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together, more teachings, more revelations, more practical applications of these timeless truths that can support you as you walk this path of recognition. And let me know you made it all the way through by commenting, "Christ within me is born." When I see that phrase, I'll know this message landed with someone who was ready to receive it, and that means everything to me. It creates a connection between us, this community of people who are waking up to their true nature as spiritual consciousness. If this video shifted something in you, if it opened a door you didn't even know was there, go ahead and hit that like button. It's a simple gesture, but it helps this content reach others who are searching for these truths, and it lets me know that what I'm sharing here is serving you in your journey. There's another video right here that goes even deeper into how to maintain this recognition. When life gets challenging, when circumstances seem to contradict everything you know to be spiritually true, click on it and continue with me there. I think you're going to find it speaks directly to wherever you are right now in your spiritual unfolding. I'll see you in that next video, and until then, rest in the recognition of what you truly are.